Homework 7, Chapter 6. And the first one that we have asked for from that chapter is number 6. Please let me know if you are unable to see the screen. So we are going to pay, let's see, a stock you're interested in paid a dividend of $1 last year. Can anyone tell me whether that is D0 or D1?
D0.
Very good. So I'm going to write some basic stuff down here, and then I'll turn it to where you can see the paper. The anticipated growth rate in dividends and earnings is 25% for the next 2 years before settling down to a constant 5% growth rate. So what kind of problem is this? Is this constant dividends, constant dividend growth, or supernormal or differential dividend growth?
It's supernormal.
Yeah, it's supernormal. Okay, so we've got the growth rate. The first one is 25%. And then the second growth rate is 5%. And then we have a discount rate of 12%. And they're asking us to calculate the expected price of the stock. So now I'm going to switch over and get back to the document cam. Oh, I need to spin this around. Okay, please let me know if you're having any trouble seeing the document camera. Can you read my writing? I'm going to take it. Okay, very good. Okay, so how do we start with something like this? First of all, they tell us that it's D0, but we know we don't get D0. We also know that we're going to work this out in our calculator. And so what we're going to do here is write out what these different things are going to be. But first thing I want to do is draw a picture. And we're going to use the kindergarten method. They tell us that that dividend that they give us is at time 0. And then they say for the next 2 years. And so I'm going to say 1, 2. And so that means we need to get these individual dividends. So we need D1 and D2. And then we're also going to need a P2 that's going to give us the price that represents at time 2 all the dividends that will be paid at time 3 going forward. And so basically we're going to have that D1 is equal to 1 plus G2 times our original D0. We're going to have that D2 is going to be equal to D1 times 1 plus G2. So that's all we need to know for the individual dividends. Now we need to know P2. And P2 would just be D3 over R minus G2. Sorry, should be 1 up here. Okay, so this should be D3 over R minus G2. Do we know D3? Can anybody tell me how we're going to get to D3?
By incrementing the dividends by the growth.
Yeah.
Supernatural growth.
Very good, thank you. And it's going to be the second growth rate. And so that's going to be what we do for P2. And so what I want to do in my calculator is, first of all, recognize that we don't get the year 0 dividend unless they tell us otherwise. C01 is going to be equal to D1. C02 is going to be equal to D2 plus P2, because both of those cash flows happen at the same time. So I want you to go ahead and get your calculator out if you haven't already. Get that thing turned on. And we're going to hit CF, second, clear work. And for CF, 0, we're going to have 0. Then I'm going to arrow down. C01 is going to be D1. And so what I'm going to do is take 1 times 1.25, which is 1 plus our first growth rate, and that gives me $1.25. And I want to do two things here. First of all, I want to hit enter, and I want to hit store 1. That's D1. Now, the next one is going to be D2 plus P2. Let's get down here. Oh, by the way, F01 is 1 because there are no two identical cash flows in this thing until we get out beyond where we're looking. Arrow down C02. Actually, there are no identicals at all because it's constantly growing past that. C02, we're going to do D2. Can anyone tell me how to get D2 given what I have here in the calculator?
Multiplying the growth rate with things that's stored in 1, I think.
Yeah, so we're going to say recall 1 times 1.25 equals enter. Now that gives us D2. But keep in mind, C02 needs to be D2 plus P2. How are we going to figure P2? Well, it's going to be this D2 we have right here. Sorry about my ring light here. I think we may just be stuck with that. Okay, so it's going to be this D2 multiplied by 1 plus G2. What's this G2?
0.05.
Very good. Okay, so I'm going to multiply this times 1.05, divide by, open parentheses, R is 0.12 minus that second growth rate, 0.05, close parentheses, equal. So I'm getting $23.44 here. I'm going to hit enter here, but we're not quite there. So this just represents P2. What do I need to add back to it?
D2.
Yeah, so we're going to say plus recall 2 equal. Uh-oh, that didn't work. Plus recall 2 equal. Okay, maybe I didn't store it then. 1.25 times 1.25. It was 1.5625, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, store 2. And then we're going to plus 20, what was it, 23 point, there it is. 1.525. So that's 25. So I'm going to go and put in 25 here. So that just represents D2 plus P2. Is anybody else not getting this number? Please let me know if anyone's having trouble. Okay. This is one thing I hate about Zoom. I can't see your faces to see if you're in pain or not. Okay, now, how am I going to figure out the net present value of all these things that we put in the cash flow register? Ms. Robinson, how am I going to get the present value for these cash flows that I put in here? Mr. Taylor, how am I going to get the present value for the cash flows we've been putting in here?
We're going to go second, net present value.
Okay, we don't have to hit second, but you're absolutely right. We're going to hit net present value. And what will we put in for I? Would it just be the return here?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to hit 12, enter, arrow down, compute. So that tells me that the answer is $21.05. Let's see. Come on. And there we go. There's our correct answer, $21.05. Okay, the student who requested this, does this make sense to you?
Yeah.
Very
We're
good.
good.
Okay, now I'm going to give you a little hint about what to do when you run into one of these on the exam. By the way, do you think this is difficult for students to get the right answer? Absolutely. And so what I would tell you to do is if you see this, skip it. Wait till the very end. This, I'm going to put at most one of these on the exam that I can think of. It'll be very similar to this. That's going to be 2.5% of your overall grade. There's going to be a lot of simpler stuff. So if I were you, I would just skip this one. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Okay, now let's see. We also have a request for number 9. Turnip and parsley common stock sells for $31.65. Let's see. So P0 equals 31.65 at a market rate of return of 9.5%. So R is equal to 9.5%. The company just paid their annual dividend of $1.20. Let's see, Mr. Osawogwu, is that D1 or D0?
D0.
Very good. D0 is equal to 1.20. And they're asking what is the growth rate of their dividend? Oh, this gets nasty. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. And we're going to write out how all this relates. So we know that P0 is equal to D1 over R minus G. But we do not have D1. What do we have? We have D0. And so we're going to have to multiply by 1 plus G, divide by R minus G. My P's and D's look too much alike. Okay, now here is the problem. This variable that we're trying to find is actually in 2 places, and this usually freaks students out. But with a little bit of algebra, we can handle this with no problem. So the first thing I'm going to do is multiply both sides by R minus G. And that's going to give me P0 R minus G is equal to D0, 1 plus G. Now, the second thing I'm going to do is use the distributive property and say P0R minus GR equals D0 plus D0G. Someone stop me if I break any algebraic laws. I think so far I am good. Okay, now to get G by itself, we need to move this to one side and this to the other. And so what I'm going to do is say P0R minus D0, I'm just subtracting it from both sides, equal to, and I'm going to add GR to both sides, plus D0G. Have I blown any minds yet? Okay, so how can we get G by itself? Any ideas what we should do next? It's the opposite of distributing. And so I'm going to pull G out of here. And what will I be left with? R plus D0. And so now I can just divide both sides by R plus D0, and I get G is equal to P0R minus D0 divided by R plus D0. Okay, now let's go ahead and throw the numbers in there. P0R is 31.65. We're going to multiply that by R, which is 0.095. Always remember to use the decimal, not the percentage. Minus D sub 0, which is $1.20, divide by R plus D0. That's looking weird. Let's see if it works out. 1.295. Okay, so here we go with the calculator. 31.65 times 0.095 equals 31.65 times 0.095 equals, I've got 3.00675 minus 1.2 equals, divided by 1.295 equals. I've messed something up here. I have definitely messed something up here. Let's go back and look through. So I multiplied both sides by r minus g. I distributed that, d0 plus d0z.
When
oh, there it is. There we go. Okay, so now, instead of moving GR over, I've got GP0. Does that look right?
Do you mind moving the paper a little bit to your right?
Like this?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, and so now that's GP0. There we go. And so G is equal to, and this should be P0 plus D0. And so on the bottom here, it should be 31.65 plus 120. Let's try this one more time. 31.65 times 0.095 equals minus 1.2 equals divide by 32.85 equals. And that gives us 0.055. And when I go back to share my screen with you guys again, we can see that that is the correct answer. Now, look at the way that they've done it here. They may do it in an easier way that you could deal with more easily. They went ahead and plugged in every number except for G, and then they just solved for G. And for most people, that's the best way to go. In fact, for me on a COVID day, apparently that's the best way to go. Normally, I'm better at just doing the algebra, but you need to figure out what works for you. Now, how about this? What would you think about just putting, and I'll show it to you here again. What would you think about just putting this formula on your formula sheet for in case you encounter one of these on your exam? That way you don't have to worry about plotting through the algebra like I did. Questions or comments? Okay, the student that asked for number 9, does this work for you?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so that is all I have for chapter 6. Are there any other questions from chapter 6 before we move on? I'm going to take that as a no. Okay, so let's go back now. Chapter 10, we have a request for homework number 8.